All right, so we are in another green room episode. So for those of you who are rocking with us for the very first time, welcome. This green room series is something where I'll have conversations with lots of smart people. We've got subject matter expertise all across the board. And today I've got the distinct honor to talk to a buddy of mine, Tanya. She will introduce herself in a sec, and we'll get into a conversation about her journey through career, her work life, her community life, the stuff that she's passionate about, what she's reading, and all the things. So, Tanya, with that, I'll give you take 2-3 minutes to jump into a quick intro, and then we'll kick off the conversation here.
Hi, Brandon. So great to see you. And thank you so much for inviting me for this awesome chat. I was expecting a green room though. So that was, was hoping that there would actually be a green screen. So, for everyone who doesn't know me, I'm Tania Berenjian. I live in the Bay Area. I am a mother, a woman in tech, a wife, trying to figure out all the ways to describe myself. I've been a person of the world. So I grew up in Montreal, Canada, for about 13 years of my life. And then we moved to sunny San Diego, where I spent middle school and high school. And then I trekked around the US, going to North Carolina, Wisconsin, back to San Diego, and now up in the Bay for the last decade. And so I'm out in Orinda. You could tell I'm here in my house, and normally we'd be hanging out in an actual room. So it's awesome to see you, Brandon.
Yeah, thanks for that, and I appreciate you've taken kind of the listeners and people who will look at this kind of to all the different locations. And I have some questions about each of those places. And I'll save those for a little bit later. But maybe this is a course that we've been teaching at Stanford for this quarter, and the subheading of it is called Designing Black and Brown Spaces. So the um, the time that we're in as a nation, like we're just kind of post-election, so everybody finally knows the results. Um, but maybe we start off with just how are you doing? It's been a whirlwind of a year, and for all those points of intersectionality that you listed, it's probably been interesting to try to juggle all of that. So let's
Oh
just
yeah.
start with that. Like, how is Tanya doing right now?
Tanya's doing all right. I mean, she got to wash her hair today, so today's a great day. So it's been a year, it's funny because as I was prepping or thinking about this conversation, I thought about, okay, well, Tanya, what do you like to do for fun? Or like, what are your hobbies? And it made me really sad that I love traveling, and that's typically what I center my life around, right? Like every month or so or every other month, that's what we like doing. And that's one thing that I haven't been able to do this year, which really puts a damper on my happiness meter. But otherwise, I'm thankful. I have a great job, I have an awesome family, I have a support system that I've built out through COVID times. So I'm truly grateful for that. Um, and we have our clean air back in California. So thankfully we could go
Yeah.
on walks and do things outside again. So that's definitely nice. But it's so interesting to see like the swing of my mental health as time went by from March to April, where it was like, oh, hooray, we're all working from home and we don't have to commute into the office, to like, oh, I'm doing the same thing over and over with a little kiddo. I've got a 3-year old, and she needs a lot of attention. So we tried to do the co-parenting, working remotely with the child at home. So my husband and I would tag in and out on each other's calendars, going like, okay, these are 2 hours. Tanya gets to meet with her team and her company. And then here are 2 hours that Kayvon gets to use for whatever. But the problem was meetings run over, and then you're struggling internally, right? You're like fighting with each other, going, okay, well, no, this is my time, but I had something really important pop up. So after about 2 weeks, we realized that it was too much of a challenge to really do this on our own. So we brought in my in-laws, who were really able to help to juggle the childcare. So I'm truly grateful for grandma taking over there. And I had a little bit of guilt with that too, because I saw other, coworkers who didn't have that luxury, right? Whereas I was like, ha ha ha, now I have all this free time to do my job. So truly, like it's been a year though, because I noticed that my daughter was getting less and less social, and craved that attention whenever she was coming back home or like on weekends, right? So she was starting to act out. So we decided to put her back in preschool, like a small preschool nearby, this August. So fingers crossed things are okay. Just a little cold here and there, but
Yeah.
otherwise, our health has been good, and truly thankful that we have a system that still works.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm from Chicago, so I wish that I had my family a little bit closer. But my wife's family is in the Bay Area, and we've got some uncles and some cousins that are close-ish. So that's for sure kind of a blessing that some people maybe take for granted, and something that you for sure appreciate, especially now in a year like this. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, that's awesome. How about if we do a little bit of rewind? Take me. You mentioned how cold it's been in California, and like that we've got clean air to breathe. When I think of cool weather and clean air, going up to your time in Canada and Montreal, like what was it like for the time that you spent there? Just because that's a city that I've never been to.
Oh man, it was great. It was great growing up there, although it was a little challenging too. So I'll give you a little background about me and where my family's from. So I'm first generation Canadian. So my mother immigrated from Bangladesh, and my father immigrated from India. And so they were making a life for themselves, and they got sponsorship to move to Canada to build their careers. And so growing up there, it was like, super liberal.
Yeah,
So the people were like, it was one of those towns that kind of reminds you of Europe, but still at the same time, there wasn't a whole lot of diversity.
mhm,
So I was growing up in a time where I was really, really trying to assimilate with the culture there, which is like fitting in with either the English speaking crowd or the French speaking crowd,
yeah,
and try to like be as white as possible. So even like my name, I added a Canadian American uh, accent to it, because my parents call me Tania,
yeah,
and I go by Tanya
yeah,
because it's easier for others to pronounce my name. But at the time, it was super. It wasn't very diverse. So growing up in that area, you would think that, okay, well, Montreal, it's got so much culture, and now it's changed. But we
yeah.
lived in the West Island, which wasn't so um, diverse and exciting.
Mhm.
So it was a place where you had your seasons, so people would come out and really be excited to enjoy the air, the warmth, really from May to early fall, and then we'd all hibernate because the snow would go up to like my chest sometimes. Like if you went out to my backyard,
Mhm.
the areas you wouldn't plow. So similar to Chicago.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so hopefully that answers your question around what
Yeah, you
Montreal's like.
gave me a window of like when to visit for sure. Like I know I
Oh
tell
yeah.
people, like I don't go to Chicago between like November, like it is now, all the way to like about April.
Oh,
Uh,
totally.
I'm like,
I mean,
I pay money to like go to a place that's colder in climate and where I might have to shovel my parents' driveway. So
yeah, and that was the thing. Like the first couple days, you're excited because it snowed, and then and then 2 months in, you're like, when will I see the sunshine again, and when will I feel warmth again? And funny story, I we moved to San Diego, which is totally opposite, right? Like sunshine every day. But when I went back to Wisconsin and in the like closer to Chicago, I did a year there, and my bones were frozen, like literally. Like I would do this and you would hear a bunch of snapping noises. It was so gross. It took me 3 years to thaw out from that, even though I grew up in Canada.
Mhm. That's crazy. Same here, like in the Bay over the last couple days, it's been pretty cold. I had to scrape some stuff off my windshield yesterday. We keep one of the cars outside of the garage. So like, I'm like, wow, I pay a lot of property taxes to be like scraping this type of weather off of my windows. We need some more sunshine here. So like, it's good that today is a little bit better. Uh,
Yeah.
so today, like, we both work in tech. Um, we both kind of are minorities in parts of the organization and the industry that we work in. And a lot of the people who are watching this are gonna try to figure out like a way to get into the technology industry, or we'll be taking insights from this conversation to help to apply, because maybe they're in their teens or 20s right now. Could you take us back to maybe end of high school or into those like college years? Like, what was your mindset? Like, did you always know you were destined to do what you're doing today? Like, how did it come together? And
No, that I'd be a sales leader at Amazon. No, I don't think that was my dream as a child. But I'll start with my parents. I think that'll be a good place to kind of give you that insight. My parents were, hardworking immigrants. My mom actually was stay at home, even though she studied engineering. She was the first woman to pursue engineering in her college in Bangladesh. So she spent like her young years studying, learning. But when they moved to Canada, they needed some type of childcare system, and it just turned out that she decided to put her career on complete pause, and she was a mother to three daughters. But my father was an engineer, and my entire life I was brought up as you need to be either a doctor, an
Yeah,
engineer, or a lawyer. Like you can't do anything else. And so I was like, oh yeah, I want to be a doctor because I've got all these toys and I've got a stethoscope and
yep.
I could totally do this. Fast forward to college where I did pretty well in math in high school. So that was the one area where I was like, okay, well, I think maybe engineering. So why don't I think about medicine and engineering, tie it together and do bioengineering?
Yeah.
So I got into UCSD under a bioengineering pre-med major,
Mhm.
which in my mind I was like, that's so cool. I get to do it all. But my first year, I started to get C's and B's in my science classes. And I was like, oh no, I'm actually not that good at this.
Yeah.
And I was falling behind really fast. And I realized quickly that my brain is not good at memorizing.
Mm.
So the bio classes hit me hard because I just couldn't remember things. I could have them on a cheat sheet and guide me, but during exams, I wouldn't have those cheat sheets with me,
Yep.
right? And so that's where I just realized that bio was not something that I wanted to pursue any further. But I was still doing okay in the math. So then I explored math as a major,
Mhm.
which also wasn't true. Like the math that I learned in high school, right? It was like this abstract, they weren't even numbers anymore. They were letters and discrete things that I couldn't conceptualize. So I wasn't very interested in that. So then I decided, okay, well, maybe engineering is that path for me. So then I took more math classes, I took more physics, and then I found that I was doing okay in those. So
Yeah.
I pivoted to mechanical engineering,
Mhm.
which I thought was okay. But I really wasn't the best in my classes. And I was used to being like number one in high school, right? Like, because I mean, for anyone who has like uh, Indian or Bangladeshi parents, it's like you got to get an A plus. Like, why'd you get an A minus? Got to have an A plus. Going from that student to like I'm struggling right now and I'm having a really hard time even passing my classes. It was a struggle for me. And so it eventually I I I was able to pass most of my classes. I had a terrifying moment, and I'll share this with the group. I I couldn't get past my circuits class.
Mhm.
which was one of the requirements, even though in mechanical engineering, you don't really focus on the circuits and electrical engineering, but that was the one class that got me. And I received a failing grade on my final exam. And this was like moments before I was graduating.
Mm.
And I had a job lined up. And my job was with Cisco right out of college. And the reason why they hired me was because they were like, oh, you're pretty social and you have an engineering major.
Yeah.
Have you considered sales engineering? And I was like, huh, let's talk about my social aspect here. How will that help me?
Yeah.
And all of my stories, like through that journey, I realized that I was never the top engineer, but I was always coordinating folks. I
Mm.
was really good at gathering like all the smart people together. And then together we would make a project. And then I'd write up the paper and then help with the presentation and get it across the finish line. So I ended up being more of a team lead, not so much like the engineer who got the job done.
Sure.
So for me, that was like, oh, cool. I could do a job where I could kind of do the same thing. So I had that job lined up at Cisco, getting into their sales associates program. However, I had a failing grade on an exam, which was about to hold me back from getting that dream job. Um, so then I went and made a case to my professor and I was like, please, 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 can you please do something for me? Like I got this job and described what it was.
Yep.
Can you please just call it a passing grade? Give me a D so I could count it as my one.
Yeah.
And this was like mortifying for my parents, like telling them like what was going on in the background. They're like, oh my gosh, like we failed as parents. But in my mind, I'm like, I just talked myself into a passing grade and I just scored a job. What's the problem? So that was kind of my journey into my first job um, as a sales engineer. My family had issues with that because they said, "Oh, sales, like what is sales engineering? Like, no, you have to be the engineer building things. You're not the salesperson because everyone thinks of the seller as, I'll joke about this. A used car salesman, right? Which I joke because my father-in-law is a used car salesman. So
Yeah.
so it's just that was like the one thing that they were really concerned about because they didn't want me to be like a seller. Um, but it was a leap that I took because I saw it as a cross between engineering and business, right? So getting business skills and engineering skills. In that year, Cisco trained us for 12 months. I got to move to North Carolina, so that
Mhm.
was my first hop. Um, and got technical training, but also presentation skills training too. So teaching customers basically all about technology. And I thought that was really neat because I got some handholding instead of just, you're free and go build something or go do something.
Yeah.
Um, so that was my first step into tech sales.
Yeah. Thank you for the candor and kind of sharing that. I know that I've told a few people that I'm used to the same as you, like getting A's all throughout high school, and then freshman year, first semester, like hit me like a ton of bricks. Like I was in an electrical engineering program, and I had torn my ACL the day after I graduated high school, so I was in a wheelchair all summer long.
Oh no.
And when I got to campus, all of these freedoms that we now had because, you lived outside of your parents' house. So I was trying to go to class in a wheelchair, trying to like show up at parties in a wheelchair. I was like doing all these different things, and my study habits hadn't been solidified. So that first semester, I think I got like a 1.9 or something, like a whole bunch of C minuses and like a couple B's. And it was like, wait a minute, I did the same thing I did in high school, in college. Like, how does it translate to the worst grades I've ever gotten in my whole life? So the second semester in that freshman year, people thought I had actually went home and dropped out because they never saw me. They they were surprised at the end of the semester to see me, coming out of final exam rooms haven't taken the tests, but I literally had to go to the library every single day, get tutoring, get all the help, don't go to anything social and fun in order to like get my life back together. So I'm hoping that people who listen into this conversation can just appreciate, as you move from uh, season through season in your life, that you'll have to like, put some things down that you used to do and then pick up some new things that you might be uncomfortable doing. You have to ask for help. You have to make challenging decisions and think independently. Like your parents, they had one idea for you, and you're
Yeah.
like, no, I want to do something a little bit different. And from what I know about you, it's worked out. So
Oh yeah, I didn't think it would though, because I had a little too much fun, just like you that first
yeah,
year. And then it was like, oh well, I need to graduate in 4 years. And that was the thing where I really had to kick it up a lot. And even sometimes I'd be working really hard, but still not pulling off the grades that I wanted. Right. And so it's not about just working hard, but you got to be smart with your time. And you mentioned getting tutors and really like using those office hours. I think that's what really helped me, because I could sit down with a book all day, but I'm in my own brain, right? Like I'm reading the same words, and maybe those words from someone else comes off as completely different. Like they could conceptualize it better for you.
yeah.
So ask for help. Don't be afraid, because that's truly important.
Amen. So I want to touch on something that you said before, because I've heard it lots of times throughout my life and career. The whole concept of like doctor, lawyer, or engineer from like immigrant parents. What is it about those three things that make those the things that they like steer their children to? Is it like the money? Is it the prestige? What is it about those three categories that?
It's funny. I had this conversation with my mom more recently, because she still thinks that I need to like go to graduate school, and I still haven't earned my.
Daniel, when you grow up, I want you to do this.
So I brought up the fact. I was like, Mom, like, okay, pretend I'm making a whole bunch of money. Does that make you happy? And she's like, no, I don't care about that. I care about your title. And it's truly like that prestige, where she could go around telling her friends, this is what my daughter does. Like truly, that's I think that ties to their pride. Like they want to showcase their child. And the way immigrant parents act is like they'll tell you that you're terrible, but then to their friends you're like.
It's the greatest thing.
Yeah. So I didn't figure that one out until way later, but it
Yeah.
was always like, okay, I must please my parents, because they need this glory. And I think it's because they're in this country and they're not familiar with
Mhm.
the way things are here. All they have is their children, and they take the success from their children and basically use that, um, to tell themselves that they've become successful.
Yeah.
I think that's been the thing, at least the pattern that I've seen with my parents and then their friends.
Yeah, that's enlightening because like my lived experience, growing up in Chicago, two African American parents, um, I can trace back like going back to my great grandmother who's now 103
Oh
and like
wow.
picked cotton in Mississippi. Like she wasn't a slave, but she physically has picked cotton in her life.
Yeah.
You get a sense of, my dear got this far, and then my grandma got this far, and then my parents got this far. So you get like this sense of responsibility where you're like, okay, I understand the struggles of the generations before me, so now I've got to like take it further because this is what they
Yeah.
saw in their mind's eye, but they were like limited and they couldn't get there because of whatever the reason. So like to hear you kind of come from a little bit of a different angle, what were uh, your parents were striving obviously for better. What were they? Did you always from a little girl have a sense of like what the end goal for your family or what their like long-term vision was?
Yeah, it's interesting though. I mean, I guess I should rewind a little, because it's a little bit of a tale of two cities, right? Where my dad comes from a privileged family. So his father was an engineer, and they lived a good life, three kids. My mom, however, comes from a poor city in Kulna, and she had about 12 siblings,
Wow.
um, well, between two moms.
Mhm.
But really, like, father was middle class,
Mhm.
like working, they would go day to day, basically. Like, they
Yeah.
wouldn't get new clothes every month. It was like every time there was a holiday, they would get a present. Like,
Yeah.
that was their background. Um, so it was almost like a marriage between the two, where like there's the privileged person who's like, oh, you must have you must have like an end goal in sight, and it's prosperity, it's through your job.
Yeah.
And then my mom's like, oh, well, you must provide for your family,
Yeah.
and you must be that provider, and you must take whatever I was not able to do, package it, and like do better.
Yeah.
So my end goal was always to, do better, meaning my mom made all these sacrifices in her life.
Mhm.
How can I make her proud? And so
Yeah.
that's what I mean, like, making your parents proud. It isn't just like, oh, it's a reward for their friends, to brag about, but truly, like, how do I show them that I've paved the pathway for my family to
Yeah.
be even more successful, with what I've been given, because I feel like I've been pretty privileged, with the way we were brought up, in Montreal, and then also in San Diego. Like, my father's been pretty darn hardworking up until the day he retired. So,
Yeah.
I think success to me is more like, how do I make sure that I don't have to worry about my day to day, and how do I set up a system for my family?
Yeah. I know you
Hopefully that
mentioned.
answers the question.
Yeah, it does for sure. And I think that people kind of watching this, they'll come from all different backgrounds. So to be able to hear kind of the different cultures and all of that, I think will be super useful. And to that point, when you talk about Montreal, I think like French speaking, some English there.
Hmm.
I grew up in Chicago with mostly like white people, black people, and like Mexican people. So I knew uh, Spanish might be part of what I did, but I took a French class in seventh grade and like just remember thinking to myself, I'll never use this. I'll probably never use Spanish either. And of course, like we both live in the Bay Area where all the different cultures and all the different languages. So do you actually did you have to learn French and like speak
Yeah,
it
I
when you
did.
were? Okay.
I did. So when I went to a bilingual elementary school. So
Mhm.
I learned English as my second language, because Bengali was my first.
Yeah.
And then I learned English and French in the same time, except my teachers were more English speaking.
Mhm.
So I think I did better on the English side. We did. I feel like it was math and French, and then science and English,
Mhm.
and then so we would alternate classes.
Got it. Got it.
So that was pretty cool. And then when we moved to San Diego, my French wasn't useful anymore, right? So
Yeah.
then I learned Spanish, and did Spanish from middle school through high school,
Yeah.
which it was easier to pick up Spanish because French is much harder, with all the tenses and whatnot.
Mhm.
So now I feel like I speak better Spanish than French, because I just don't practice it as much. But if you if you put me in France and give me a couple bottles of wine, I'll be okay.
Nice, nice. Well, that's something like I look backwards and I think of like how foolish I was to not like it was in one ear and out the other because I didn't think that I would use it or need it. And now it's
Mhm.
one of the like regrets that I have of not like
Well, you can
learning
still
it.
pick it up. I'm still learning languages. I feel like it's something that you could always do.
Mhm.
My in-laws, so my family's pretty mixed.
Yeah.
So you heard about my side. My husband's side, his family's Iranian and African American.
Mhm.
So the Iranian side likes to get together and they talk a lot, like in Farsi. And I hate not knowing what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So I started watching YouTube videos, and
Yeah.
like, now I know key phrases, and and I could pick up trigger words. I'm like, okay, you're talking about me right now. Or usually they're talking about food, but I don't want to be left behind. So that's why more recently I've been like, okay, let's pick up
Yeah.
Farsi just to put them on edge. But they're
Yeah,
amazing.
that's another side of the brain. Like people who pick up language are people that I'm just like I honor and like respect them so much because not that I can't do it, but it took me a while to like get everything down when I was taking the French and taking the Spanish. So
Mhm.
props to you, and I might have to do a little research so next time I see you in person I can throw some.
Totally. Well, there's this app too called Duolingo, and you
Yep.
could pick a random language and go through like little classes. And I did that with I think it was French before we went to France just to brush up on my tenses.
Nice. Well, that makes me think of kind of another segment that I was planning to do. And since you threw out an app, I will ask you to throw out two more apps that you love, and like this will start our little lightning round. While I ask you a bunch of different questions.
Oh my gosh.
And,
An
uh,
app that I love. Now I got to pull up my phone and go,
so
oh, what is
I'll give
it?
you some caveats. So like non-default Apple apps. So like it can't be Apple Maps, and it can't be,
Can't
you
be
know,
like Facebook or
I guess that's non-default.
Instagram.
You could put it there if you want, but like I'm sure when people watch this, if you say Instagram, they'll be like, "Well, I knew about Instagram already." So just little nugget apps that you're like, "I didn't think I would love this, and nobody knows about it, but I really like this app."
Yeah, well, I think Libby's really cool. I think that's a pretty common one.
Mhm.
Um, have you used Libby before? It gives you library books.
No, I
So more, I realized that I wasn't reading nearly enough, only because just I have so many hours in the day, right? I could hang out with my daughter, or I could read a book, or I could read books to her. So then I end up reading children's books. But Libby's really cool because I have a local library card,
Mhm.
and I'm able to put myself on queues.
Yeah.
So if there's a really popular book, I might get it 4 weeks later.
Mhm.
Um, but I've been reading up. Just it hasn't really been fun reading recently. But I had Becoming by Michelle Obama, which was more, in the middle, which I thought was a great start, but I didn't finish it. So I do a lot of starts and then I don't finish. So
Yeah.
that's just the way my reading goes these days. But I have about 10 or 15 books that I really want to get through. And usually I'll go on an hour walk. So I'll pop in my earbuds, turn on the audiobook and listen and try to learn
Yeah.
while I do it.
That's a pro parenting tip for anybody out there. Like I just bought a bicycle, and I ride my bike 10 miles to the office every day, and like that takes about 45 minutes, and I'll throw my earbuds in and turn on Audible. That's one of my apps, and I just like get a
Oh
book
yeah.
every couple of weeks and just let it play while I'm riding. So
With
you got,
Audible, you're buying them, right?
yeah, you get one
Yeah.
credit every couple of weeks for like.
Libby's free.
Is it okay? Is it
It is.
Libby?
Libby.
Okay,
So
Libby.
anything you would find at the library, you could get them in like Kindle form, so you could read the actual book, or you could get the audiobook, so
Very
you
good.
could listen to them too. So I'm very frugal, so I like renting for free.
Yes. I'll check out Libby. Let's jump from apps to, you mentioned travel a whole bunch. So like
Mhm.
maybe like favorite spots to vacation, or like maybe give me top three places. If you could go anywhere in the world outside of the Bay Area any time of year, give me three places that you,
With child or without child?
I mean, let's go without, because some of let's not assume that everybody who's watching this has a
As
plus one or
children.
plus two. So let's
Yeah.
just do solo.
So I'd say Mexico's been a fun place for us to go, only because it's local. Like it's an hour flight away, maybe 3 hours, at least on the West Coast.
Yeah.
So that's been a fun place for us to go and trek around, near Cabo.
Mhm.
Todos Santos is a spot that we've been to more recently. Well, before March, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, we where else do we go? Yeah, near Cabo, La Paz was also a really cool place to go. I'm on a meeting. I have someone moving around here going, oh, what about San Miguel? That's a fun spot. San Miguel de Allende. We went there for a wedding just last year.
Mhm.
Cute little town, but it took forever to get to. So you got to go through airports and then you got to get a car ride for 2 hours to finally get to the cute little town. But once you're there, it's a magical place.
Yeah.
It felt very Euro, and you felt so safe walking the streets at any hour of the day. Um, Truly would go back there, but it's just hard to get to.
Yeah.
I think we like to go to places where it's difficult to get to because we just assume we'll only get a chance to go once.
Yeah.
A spot like that was the Maldives. So we went there before our daughter was born. So that was really fun. But that's not like an every year destination. That's more
Yeah.
like you want to have a lot of fun and like experience something being on an island far away. Did that. Went to Iran, went to Bangladesh, India. Yeah, just all over the place. But our Euro destinations, like the repeat spots, are usually France.
Yeah.
Only because there's so much to explore within France. So we did a wine trip. So flew out to Burgundy and drove up the country. And then we also crossed over and did Bordeaux.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it was a food and wine trip for
Yeah.
anyone who's really into food and wine. It's very different from our wine country here in the Napa Sonoma area. It's at least on the Burgundy side, it was not as Disneyland. So you're really like roaming around, knocking on doors, going, "Hey, I don't speak a lot of French, but do you have any wine?"
Yeah.
Then usually it's like, "Oh yeah, come on in." Like little mom and pop places. So that was really cool.
Yeah,
But that's an area I want to go back to.
nice. I've only been to Paris, but yeah, South and kind of in the country is something that a bunch of the
Oh
people
yeah.
in the city recommended that we do, like on the next time out. So
You got
definitely,
to go to Nice. So pretty.
yeah, definitely on the list of places to go and things to do. Um, so let's jump out of travel and let's do, how about let's go to like Netflix and to books. Well, you mentioned a little bit of
Ooh,
other books. Let's go to like what you're watching.
Netflix. You don't want to hear the shows that I watch. And also, yeah, I haven't been watching a whole lot of TV. But I guess I could give you some like shows that I've watched more recently if you'd like.
Yeah, top three favorite shows, or like we can go like favorites, or we can go recent. I'll let you choose.
Okay. I recently watched Dear Black People, or sorry, Dear White People.
Yeah.
Sorry. That was a really good one.
Mhm.
Dear White People was one that I wasn't really into, and then it was more like, those shows that you just keep watching and you're like, oh, I want to know what happens next. But
Yes.
really, like, and then you might learn like a tidbit or two, or like, I enjoyed that one. What else have I watched recently? Uh, I can't remember, Brandon. Like, it's been a while.
How
I'm
about kids
gonna,
shows? I know that
yeah, I mean,
father,
that's embarrassing.
I sit with so much Daniel Tiger and so much like um Blues Clue. There's
Yeah,
everything. What
it's
is
Daniel
about
Tiger. It's constant Daniel Tiger. It's Dora the Explorer. Um, those are the two main ones. And we tried to bring in Arthur and then give him else a cookie.
Okay, yeah.
I think those are our top four. But my daughter's really into Disney princesses,
Yeah.
so um, we've been watching a lot of Tiana and Moana, Jasmine, so all the brown princesses.
Yeah.
Um, and then also we've got Frozen as well.
I think every kid universally is like addicted to Frozen. Like my son also loves all of the Disney princesses, and he's got like his big sister's dolls. He's like hugging them and like
Oh,
kissing
no way.
them. It's so weird.
That's so cute. I bought like a little sticker set for my daughter, and most of my Amazon purchases and Costco purchases are usually for her. But we're going through potty training right now, so
Yep.
we got frozen stickers for whenever she makes it in.
Nice. Nice. So I know we've got about maybe 10 or 15 left. I did want to like double click into in the tech industry, like post Cisco, like getting back to the title of the class, designing space for black and or designing black and brown spaces.
Yeah.
Um, how have you kind of made space for yourself and made space for like other people who would identify kind of outside of the mainstream? I know that everybody has like a little bit of a different story, so I'd be interested to hear
Yeah.
how
And
you.
I'd be happy to kind of bridge the gap here because I kind of talked about my first job out
Mhm.
of college, and then I didn't finish on how I got to Amazon.
Yeah, keep going.
Um, so yeah, let's keep going. So at Cisco, after that first year of training, I was able to move into a field role. So I had the state of Wisconsin that I was helping a sales rep sell into. So there was a sales rep, there was a sales engineer. Sales rep would pitch the idea, and then the engineer would design and showcase how everything would work in the customer's environment.
Mhm.
So I focused on voice over IP, so unified communications. That was Cisco's big thing back then. Um, so I did that for about a year, and it was really hit and run, like meeting lots of customers
Yep.
and really not continuing a relationship, but more like, here's the value that I'm giving you, and here's what you need. All right,
Mhm.
see ya.
Yeah.
Um, so I knew that I wanted to build better relationships within my accounts, instead of doing that, you know,
Yeah.
or it almost like hit and run sales.
Yep.
So I had an opportunity, and this was when in 2008, and the economy was not in a good place,
Mhm.
and we had some reorgs going on. I had an opportunity to move back to San Diego
Mhm.
within Cisco, but I had an opportunity on the enterprise team. So same role, but I had three accounts. So I had Sony Electronics,
Mhm.
Ingram Micro, SAIC. So big accounts
Yeah.
compared to the teeny tiny shops that I was going after in Wisconsin.
Mhm.
That was enlightening because I realized that my customers, well, I felt like my customers were smarter than me, right? Like they've been doing this their entire lives. They've been using these technologies forever. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, I'm this young, 20, 23, 22-year old coming in trying to sell to them. It was an odd time, and especially like in this space, predominantly men.
Mhm.
So it was really difficult for me to kind of navigate at first, but eventually I figured out something that worked for me, which was I was the bridge between my engineering team and the customer, and they didn't have access to that, right? And
Yeah.
that's the value that I ended up bringing to my customers. So it wasn't really like, I'm going to teach you something, but it was more like, well, let's think of a different way to do this, which helped me to earn some trust. And so really like it's strange because at that time, since there were so few women, I try to look like a guy. Like I dress like I'd wear my slacks and my loose shirts, and
Yeah.
there was like an image that I was trying to portray, not like
Yeah.
not very feminine at all. Um, which in hindsight, I laugh at a little bit, but it
Mhm.
was me trying to just assimilate. But I did that for about 3 years. And then I moved to the Bay Area. And in the Bay Area, I moved into a mid market role, or it was more named. So, how do I describe this? I had about 10 accounts.
Yep.
So, 10 key accounts in the Bay Area. So, same kind of deal, large accounts, they know more than I do, but I had something that they didn't have, which was the power of new features and knowledge that I would bring to them. And so, slowly, I realized that I was not that deep subject matter expert, but I was more of um, a champion of resources. And so I realized that I was more of a seller than an engineer.
Mhm.
And that was during the last, I want to say like 3 years at Cisco,
Mhm.
where every time I was meeting with my management team, they'd be like, "Oh, Tanya, you need to sharpen your tech skills."
Yeah.
But then meanwhile, I was like, but I'm building relationships with my customers. They're buying,
Yeah.
I don't think there's a problem. It's just I enjoy doing one thing more so than the other. So I used that as an opportunity to start rebranding myself um, as a seller and not so much an engineer.
Mhm.
And while I was trying to do that, though, I ran into Amazon Web Services. I had a friend who worked there. And prior to that, Google had reached out to me going, "Hey, we're building out a cloud team.
Mhm.
We'd love to have you interview with us." And so, in parallel, I reached out to my friend at Amazon Web Service going, "Hey, I think you guys are the leaders in this space. Like, what's going on?" And so, started both conversations. Turned out that the AWS team was trying to find sellers who had technical experience. And I was like, "Well, sign me up. You're right here. You're looking at her." And I had to jump through a bunch of hoops too, because they were really testing my sales skills,
Yeah.
right? There was some back and forth on, well, you've never carried a quota. You've never had your own accounts. You've always had a sales rep. And then I would have to pull stories about, okay, well, actually, within this account, we had 3 sales reps. They didn't have time to ramp, so I was ramping them. And so, luckily, those stories worked out because they saw value in my experience and they sponsored me in, right? So they put me in a sales rep role at AWS, which was really awesome. Um, I had about 50 startups in the Bay Area, and it was a really fun space to be in because we were growing so fast. This was back in 2014, and I've been there ever since. Um, and within like the almost 7 years, I had lots of life changes and career changes too. So I pivoted right from the engineering to sales,
Yep.
and then got married within 6 months. And then fast forward a couple years, became a senior rep. Our org had grown quite a bit.
Mhm.
And then I had my first child, came back really pumped and excited. During my maternity leave, I realized that I could never be like my mom. I didn't have the patience to watch my child full time,
Yeah.
and went through a struggle there actually internally, because there was a part of me who was like, oh, I need to be her provider and I need to care for her. But I realized that I'm a better provider for her as a working mom,
Yeah.
right? Making sure that she has everything she needs. And when I actually went back to work, my husband decided to take a step back. So he said, you know what? I'm going to help out. And I'm not going to continue this job that I had. He was commuting for a startup to Palo Alto like every single day for over 2 years. I think it was almost 3 years.
Yeah.
And when I was ramping back to work, I was struggling going, okay, how am I going to do this hour commute and then add another hour to pick up and drop off our daughter? That's like 3, 4 hours on the road.
Yeah.
And I got, that's just not going to work out. So we were a team, and he decided that he would do that pick up and drop off, saving me time, right, to focus on other things. And so I had an opportunity to come back and raise my hand for a leadership role.
Mm.
And so it took a little bit of time. So I went through like an individual contributor to manager program, which was 3 months long, that Amazon just kicked off because they wanted to really focus on retention and developing our own internal employees. Once that was completed, I interviewed and became a manager. And I have 6 sales reps on my team. And that was back in January of 2019, so almost 2 years.
Wow. That's quite quite a story, and I think quite a testament too of kind of working with your partner to um, figure out like what's best for you and your family while trying to like maintain, your level of responsibility in your career too. Like
Yeah.
many people in the working world don't do that well, so that you might see them shining in corporate America, but then like little beknownst to you, their family's not thriving and like their kids are running wild or they're getting divorced and like they just
Yeah.
don't have great balance. So it's heartening to hear somebody talk about making hard decisions and partnership and like compromises and like doing everything to live a balanced life that their kid can still be thriving and their partner can still be thriving and their career can also still be thriving. So
Yeah, and we take turns like in our house, right? Like there will be times where I take a seat and I let him do whatever he needs to do, right? And then vice versa. It's constantly like if we have another kid, like that's something else that we talk about. Like what will change? Like who's going to have the steady job? Who's going to, like it's constantly a discussion for us. And I think it's important, whoever your partner is, like to keep talking about it. And it's easy to just get wrapped into the day to day. And especially with COVID, you see so many women dropping out of the workforce. It blows my mind. And I'm like, it totally could have been me too, right? If we didn't talk early and figure out, okay, well, what's going to work for us. And in this case, we just needed external help. And it worked out for us so far, at least.
yeah,
But I,
fingers.
I I always have that guilt, that guilt of, well, I'm sending my kid to the germ pool daily,
Yeah,
and I'm just trusting that they're taking all the right precautions to make sure that she's healthy and that we're healthy and we don't pass things along to our older family members.
yeah, it's a weird thing to my wife is still with our youngest who's 2 and she spends like the most time with him, but I've noticed that we put him into a 2-day a week daycare situation and totally different child at the daycare as I just sit back and observe like how independent he is and all of that versus like at home. He's just chasing her around the house and just wants to be picked up and like wants everything. So he's like a little prince at home, but he's such a different child outside. So I think sometimes we as parents, even for the parents that might be watching this, need to give our kids what they need by like putting them in kind of a different environment so that they can
Mhm.
socialize and so that they can learn and grow outside of something that's very like comfortable and like a security blanket for them. So
Mhm.
I think we as adults do it. Nobody loves change and loves learning something new from the ground up, but it's a necessary part of life. So it's been interesting on my side to see kind of that happen on my youngest.
Totally. I think we have the same child because my daughter does the same, where I'm like, how are you this perfect angel at school? And then she comes home and she just tears. I mean, the camera is not pointed at our floors right now, but there's quite the mess of toys and she just doesn't like to pick up after herself. So I've
Yeah,
gotten an extra job right now.
I got you. I got you. Well, I guess I think we've reached the top of the hour, and I just want to thank you for agreeing to come on and like share some of your experience. Like we probably just scratched the surface. There's so much more stuff I could ask you, but maybe if you could just crystallize or summarize just a couple, maybe 3 points that you'd love for people to take away, maybe for that
Yeah.
young kid who's in the middle of getting educated and trying to figure out what they're gonna be when they grow up. Maybe to that
Yeah.
whose life has been turned around a little bit because of COVID. Just a couple nuggets and words of wisdom for them as we wrap up.
I think the biggest thing is just to, there's always going to be moments where you doubt yourself. And even I doubt myself every day when it comes to certain things. So when you hear that voice telling you, I can't do this, or this isn't something that's possible right now, remind yourself that, you know, things could happen. And as long as you've got like an idea, you could go for it. And it might take more than a year, right? It might take a long time to get there, but just remember that you got to check that voice because when you let that voice take over, it wins, right? So I think that's been the biggest thing for me, where with imposter syndrome, where I'm constantly going, okay, well, if my peer could do this, why can't I?
Yep.
But I don't just say that, right? I build the plan, right? I figure out what are the steps needed to get to where I think my peer is. If I'm trying to get promoted or if I'm trying to do something special, just laying out the plan and not just saying, oh, this isn't fair, right? Make it fair. Like, and definitely like surround yourself with a positive network. I think that's really important, regardless of where you are in life. I think it helped me big time in college, where we were working on projects, and I always wanted to make sure I was surrounded by people who were smarter than me in different ways, so that way we could combine our forces and do something, greater. And I still, to this day, I don't hang out with dummy friends. They're all smart in their own ways.
I feel so honored.
I feel like everyone brings something unique to the table. And it could be different things, right? Like my husband's an excellent communicator, and sometimes I'm like very antisocial. So together we are like half social.
Yeah.
I think those are the two biggest things, where like don't doubt yourself, and surround yourself with a positive network of friends and coworkers and peers, because they could only help you. I think through my career, most of my jobs have been not because I applied for them, but it was because someone out there decided that they wanted to give me a shot, whether it was at their company or within their team, right? So that's something that everyone should keep in mind early on, as you plan out your career. Like, grow that network as big as you can.
Yeah, those are some gems that I think that everybody will be putting into their back pockets. And a couple other things I heard that were interesting were that, like, this used car salesman that your dad is probably he didn't have this in mind, but I never knew kind of the beauty and kind of all of the stuff that you have to do in the roles that we've both had experience doing. And it is a true skill to be able to coordinate and to see different talents and to see different things and like put them together and present them in a way that is valuable to the other side, whether that's a customer, whether that's a partner. And when you're studying an engineering degree or studying business or whatever your major is, there's so many things that are out there that are not obvious and apparent to you, that we both, I'm sure, would encourage you to just be curious, to ask questions, and to not doubt yourself, because there's so many different like variations of things that are available. And as technology shifts and changes, and it becomes harder and harder to for any one person to wrap their head around it all, the stuff that we do from day to day is going to become even more valuable. So
Totally.
the technical side and the social side is going to have to come together in order for us to kind of paint the future that we want for us right now, but then also for our next generation, our kids and their kids to have.
Well, thank you, Brandon. This was awesome. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah, so we will kind of conclude for now, but I don't know if you're super out there on socials, or if people wanted to find and connect you. You got any last details where people can find you? Or I don't know. I'm not a big Twitter
I'm
person.
not very. I mean, you can find me on Facebook, and it's Tania Berenjian. I think I have a Twitter too, so I don't post a lot on it though, unfortunately. It's really like I'm old. Not
yeah,
cool.
parents got stuff to do, right?
I think yeah, it's so funny. I was thinking about this too, going, man, I've been very inactive on my Facebook. But my Instagram's where I post my photos and things that I eat. So if you're interested in that, that's the place to find me.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you for blessing us with the wisdom and just the candor and like the journey. Like, is what I want people to come away with. Like, you won't always get A's. You won't always like have an obvious next step, but two people talking. Hopefully, some of the stuff that we went over will be useful for folks. So, happy Tuesday. Thanks for the time. All the best to you and the family, and stay safe and stay sane over there on that side.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate the time.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
All right. See ya.